The meeting will begin in 1 minute. The meeting will begin in 1 minute. Thank you.
Calling this meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting Tuesday, February 16th to order. First item on our agenda today will be a staff report from Lori Hogstead and Tom Greco, our city clerks. Or should I change that to just Tom?
Good evening, and I'll just be briefing you tonight. This will be a short brief, but wanted to provide an update on where we are, particularly with workers, and just some general information for you, for voters, and the way ahead. Just a reminder, of course, our election's April 12th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. A lot of great efforts already gone into pulling together the workers, but I'm going to show you on this next slide where we are specifically. We're doing really well. As a matter of fact, the last time I spoke to you, I mentioned that we had a big effort being put forth toward soliciting workers to work either in the precincts or down at the counting center at the Minnehaha County Administration Building where we tabulate the votes. And we were not too far along at that point a couple of weeks ago, but we've made great strides since then. But I do want to point out up here on the table that you see that we still are short about 62 workers. It's not an emergency, it's not a crisis. But I wanted to put it up here just to give folks in the broader community of Sioux Falls an opportunity, perhaps if they want to volunteer, to contact the city clerk office to either work in a precinct or work down at the counting center. We could explain what the positions are to them. The basic qualifications to work in a precinct is that you're a registered voter, ideally within that precinct. Of course, there's some provisions if we can't find one, but nonetheless, they'll at a minimum have to be a resident of Sioux Falls. So we're making great headway on that. And have been drawing upon historical lists of folks who volunteer at the precincts to great success. But of course, we need a few more. So if anyone's interested, certainly contact us and we'll point them in the right direction, or at a minimum, put them on a volunteer list for future elections. So looking pretty good there. Again, some work to do. Next, just want to remind people that as we start approaching the election, the citizens, it's a good time now to start thinking about voter registration and making sure that you're registered to vote here in Sioux Falls within your precinct. So if people out there have had an address change or a name change, they really should get on the Secretary of State's website. They could also link through our website to find out information about either updating their voter registration or becoming registered to vote. And on the left side of the slide up there, I have a few tools that are available. One's on the Secretary of State website. Online, it's web-based, where you could go in, type your information in, and see if you are indeed registered to vote. If you are, to make sure that your address is correct, and if it's not, then you would submit an additional form to the county auditor, or you could even bring it here. But the other thing I have there, that Vote 605, there's an app for everything, and certainly there's an app here in South Dakota for figuring out if you're registered to vote, and that's just one other tool that people could download on their smartphone to see if they're registered to vote. So we really want people to start thinking about that now so that they're prepared to go to the polls on April 12th. Voter registration ends 15 days prior to our election, but I do have down there, don't forget, there's the June 7th primary election and November 8th general election. So people can continue registering to vote prior to 15 days of for those two. And some important dates, we'll keep you updated as this progresses, but the key thing, again, is April 12th is Election Day, and you can see some of the other gates that we need to pass through between now and then. This is really focused on the voters and what people may need to do to prepare to be a part of Election Day. So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Question from the council? Councilor Rolfing?
Yes, Tom. The 62 people, what happens if we get down to a week or 5 days before and we don't have enough people at that point? Do we go to an employment agency or what?
No, I think, first I'll preface it by saying I think we're going to get to the 62 people very quickly, but if we don't, then we're just going to have to continue publicizing it and reach out to different people directly. What we're doing here with the number and the email is soliciting volunteers for them to contact us. If we don't hear from enough people, then we'll continue pulling out the phone book and our historical list and asking.
Okay.
Councilor Offenbach?
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to take this as a personal challenge to my fellow district representatives. It looks like we could, pull some strings and let people know in our districts that this is needed. So my question is, Tom, how can I post this to social media? I want to share it to social media.
I could send a link to you, and we too plan on posting some of this information, but I'll send a link. I'll send you a copy of the file or specifically what you want.
Or even, especially social media works really great if you can share a link. Yep. So once it's posted to our website.
And this is on SIRE right now, just for your information.
Okay, I'll see if I can do that. Great, thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council? Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, we have Jim David, Legislative Operations Manager.
Good afternoon, Jim David, Legislative Operations Manager. We discussed Senate Bill 84 last week, which originated from a summer interim committee, and its twin on the House side, House Bill 1156. Both bills would shift the county's law enforcement and judicial costs to cities and towns based on the municipality's share of the county population. Although Senate Bill 84 continues to wait for a hearing in Senate Appropriations, House Bill 1156 was heard this morning in House Local Government. Proponents of the bill had argued that it was time to rethink how law enforcement expenses were allocated. They mentioned that the City of Sioux Falls is 90% of Minnehaha County's population, but does not participate in jail, judicial, or public defender costs. Supporters of the bill claim that Sioux Falls was able to assume a 12 to 13% budget increase in 2016 with ease and thus able to absorb the additional costs associated with law enforcement. Opponents of the bill were represented by the Municipal League. The League sympathized with the county's growing law enforcement costs, but pointed out that 80% of the law enforcement expenses are state mandates. The League also points out that locally, municipal residents and businesses pay 82% of Minnehaha County's property taxes and 69% of Lincoln County property taxes. The County Association did provide brief testimony this morning saying that they were neither proponents nor opponents of the bill. The committee members themselves debated whether to send the bill to the House floor for more discussion. There was concern from some of the committee members that there was a financial burden on the smaller communities and that counties have not asked financial assistance from the municipalities. In the end, the bill was defeated in committee 9-4 after a due pass motion had failed. House Bill 1116 is the penny for infrastructure bill. This 1-cent sales tax could only be used for a specific capital purpose, for a specific amount, and for a limited time period. This temporary tax must also be approved by voters. Last year, this proposal was approved by the Senate, but was narrowly defeated in the House of Representatives. A vote on the House floor is scheduled today and probably within the next hour or so. We continue to watch House Bill 1092. Under current law, alcohol can only be consumed in front of an alcohol licensed business if more than 50% of the revenue is derived from the sale of food. House Bill 1092 removes the 50% food requirement. The House of Representatives did approve this bill earlier, 48-20. The bill is still waiting for hearing in Senate local government. House Bill 1102 allows an extra 15 days or 45 total days for complicated bids. This bill is also awaiting a hearing in Senate local government. And House Bill 1091 and Senate Bill 156 allow TNCs or transportation network companies to operate in the state and exempt them from the state's commercial license plate requirement. House Bill 1091 passed the House 66-2. Both Senate Bill 156 and House Bill 1092 are awaiting a hearing in Senate Transportation, and one could expect that only one of those bills will probably make it out of committee. The next legislative coffee will be held at 10 a.m. this Saturday, February 20th, at the Holiday Inn City Center. Legislators from Districts 13, 14, and 15 are scheduled to attend. The next big legislative event is February 24th. This is the last day that a bill can pass out of its house of origin. March 8th is the last day for a bill to pass both houses. They'll recess on March 11th, and then March 29th is veto day. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you, Jim. We will move forward with a Public Services Committee update on Tuesday, February 19th from Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. We had Fire Marshal, Dean Lanier discuss the fire code amendments. He went through some of these. A couple of questions came up in regards to if this is also going to be reviewed at the state level as well, and that is something that they're also considering as we move through. There has not been a lot of opposition for any of these as well. An area of focus that we did talk about was the secondary access points coming out of developments. We've heard a lot of information and lived and breathed through a couple of developments over the last 2 years. Public Service Committee would like to have an additional update on the progress from Fire Marshal Lanier, and that is scheduled for Tuesday, March 8th, to discuss the specific language to make sure it has the teeth in it and the enforcement in it through all departments. As they're moving this from policy into ordinance is the intent. That is all.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you. Next will be City Council open discussion. Any items for open discussion? Councilor Kiley.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to say that this past week, or 8 or 9 days, we spent time with our son in Phoenix, Arizona, had our first experience with Uber, and have to report that it was a good experience. The app is really simple to use. In one case, a driver had accepted and had a decline, and my son had to go through Uber to get a small fee reimbursed, and Uber had responded within 12 hours, and it was taken care of. So I was very impressed with their response time. If there is any kind of an issue, in this case it was minor. I guess the only, our second driver, it was her first weekend, and the only glitch was that her phone died on her, so her app went with it and her navigation system went with it. But fortunately, we knew where we were going, but otherwise it was a good experience. So look forward to it coming to Sioux Falls.
Yeah. Councilor Offenbach.
Thank you. It takes your kids to get you an Uber, doesn't it? I just wanted to remind the council about the Bishop Dudley House. We've talked about it off and on And I think just in light of some of the public comment we've had recently that it's important for us to remember who and what the Bishop Dudley House is. Bishop Dudley Hospitality House is an emergency safe shelter for those folks who don't have any place else to stay. And it did open last January, so it's been open just over a year. And just in that last year, I just want to read these numbers for you again. We've talked about this before, but I want you to hear these numbers again. Safe nights provided, 34,022 nights provided. Guests served, individual, unduplicated number of people that were served, 1,537. They've also served 17,855 meals. And then here's the number that's really important to me, that we need to remember that Bishop Dudley House serves about between 80 and 100 men, about between 20 and 40 women, and they also have 7 rooms for families. They have transitioned to permanent housing 52 families over that last year. And I think it's important for us to remember, and for the county commission as well, but for taxpayers in general, to remember that the Bishop Dudley House, when those families are living in those 7 rooms, those are families that are then not living on the taxpayer dollar in a hotel room somewhere in Sioux Falls. There are still many families that we need to have those hotel rooms available for folks, because the Bishop Dudley House doesn't have enough space for the need. But it's important to remember that 52 families came out of the Bishop Dudley House and transitioned into permanent housing over the last year. 33 women did the same thing. 33 women have moved from homelessness to some sort of permanent housing thanks to the Bishop Dudley House. 86 men, 164 children are involved in those numbers of transitioning from homelessness to permanent housing. This is a really key part of our service as a community, not just this. It's not a city program. It is a private program, but this is a really key part of the services that this community provides. I think it's important to remember that that piece is there for all of us, and for those folks in particular in largest parts in the worst need. And I just remind the team then that the Homeless Advisory Board is that group that the mayor created more than 10 years ago. It is a cooperative venture between the city and the county. We have one staff member that works for that group, and that group then oversees things like and ideas like what became the Bishop Dudley House, what became the safe home up north of the police department. Those sorts of ideas are coming out of this quasi governmental organization. Important for us to remember we're a big part of that. And that if you have any questions, I'm your person on that team. I'm absolutely here to help however, but all of the statistics are available online. They're on the Minnehaha County website, and I just read the numbers off of bdhh.org for you for the year's report. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Jamison.
If I could ask Counselor Erpenbach as our liaison, and I appreciate your knowledge of the facility. The city's participation in that funding and operation, what is that?
That's really a good question. You know, the City of Sioux Falls has, over the last several years, helped fund what was called the warming site at the Salvation Army. That was just an emergency shelter only during the coldest months and the coldest nights, actually, of the year. It wasn't a heat type thing. There wasn't a time when it was open during the summer when it was blistering, deadly heat out. It was only open during the coldest nights of the winter. And the city, during that time, provided $25,000 toward operating funds for that shelter. Now, in the last 2 years, the last 2 budgets that we have approved, we've approved $30,000 that goes to that same piece of operation for the Bishop Dudley House, as it acts as that warming site, that emergency shelter. So I would then plant the seed, since I've been given the opportunity, to think about Bishop Dudley is open 24/7, 365. It's not open just on those coldest nights, and it is serving between 1,500 and 1,700 unique individuals. I think that one of the conversations we need to have as a council coming up is, how does the city play a larger role in helping fund the operations for that, because it is making a difference in this community. We can look at, and I'd be happy to bring numbers, but the numbers of police calls community-wide are down and can be traced to the Bishop Dudley House. Yes, the calls there have peaked a little bit, but overall they're down, and especially in this neighborhood. There's some things to think about in terms of what that resource is doing for us in terms of overall city budget. So again, $30,000 last year and this year, and that's, I hope, will go up next year.
Counselor Jameson?
And just because Michelle seems to have all of the information, I'll just keep going because you're doing great. The occupancy rate, or are they at capacity? I mean, I can sense that during the summer, individuals may not find the need to be inside and choose not to, but do you have any kind of a sense of a cycle of what that's like?
They have, and I'm not the expert, but I have heard the stories enough and spent some time. I've volunteered down there and again on the Homeless Advisory Board. They have the room technically for between 75 and 80 men. They're usually between 90 and 100 at night, especially on those coldest nights. For women, they have about 20 women's beds, and again, I'm estimating it's about 20. They're a lot of times between 30 and 40 women. They're way over capacity. And so, it has to do with, it is just that emergency shelter. They take people as they are. It is just a place to sleep. They're required to, they close in the morning so that people will leave and go to breakfast, and they close in the evening so that people will leave and go to dinner, because they are open then as during the daytime as a day service program that is the former Good Shepherd Center that was downtown, and so it's open again 24 except for those 2 hours, 24/7, 365.
Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you, Councilor Urfenbach. Any other items for open discussion? Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting. The Land Use Committee meeting will start in 10 minutes.